Princess Zelia dropped heavily onto the cold, metal floor, trying to regain her breath. Her counselor, an older Rasavi named Vrwenen, settled beside her, scowling at the humans who just rounded them up. Behind them, the other Rasavi soldiers from the princess's expeditionary team remained bound and silent. Zelia glared at the nearest human guard. "I demand an audience with whoever is in charge here." A handful of humans busied themselves around the makeshift detention bay, looking quite pleased with their new captives. One human, tall, lean, wearing a dusty gray uniform, smirked back. "Oh, you'll get your chat, princess," he said. "But first, I need to make a few calls." Counselor Vrwenen cleared his throat to draw Zelia's attention. "Your Highness," he said quietly, "now that we're in custody." "Which wouldn't have happened," Zelia cut in, "if you had performed your duty properly." Vrwenen's muzzle twitched. "There were far too many between me and you for me to uphold that duty. I must now follow our laws. It's how our people have always." Zelia froze. "You can't possibly be serious," she whispered, eyes widening. The older Rasavi frowned, gaze shifting across the room until he spotted the human who had fought against Zelia personally. "Our culture was built on tradition," Vrwenen explained. "Even those traditions you'd rather ignore. You, princess, were defeated by that male." "Not true." Zelia snarled, ears flattening. "Two of my soldiers were there, too." Vrwenen inclined his head. "Which only makes it more impressive that he bested you. A single male, defeating all three of you in a moment of combat." Zelia let out a frustrated growl. Her retort was interrupted by a grinning human woman who sidled over. Hey, what's all this chatter?" She plopped down on a nearby cargo crate, crossing her legs. Vrwenen looked at her with polite interest. "Perhaps you could help clarify something. The one who fought by himself, who is that human?" The woman brightened. "Oh, you mean our fearless leader. Captain Ethan Rains. He decided no one else should risk their life since our formation required 4 of us in front. Didn't want us to get caught in the crossfire." Princess Zelia snorted. "You mean your little trap? You humans do love your ambush tactics, don't you?" Feigning offense, the woman gasped and placed a hand on her chest. "Just because you didn't sense us doesn't mean it was a trap, princess. We even asked you to surrender, but you insisted on fighting." Counselor Vrwenen shrugged in agreement, earning an elbow to his side from Zelia. "Stop agreeing with them," she hissed. He winced. "You're aggravating the spot they struck during the skirmish." The human woman jabbed a finger at both the princess and her advisor, looking bemused. "All right, break it up, both of you." Then her attention went back to Vrwenen. "So, about your question regarding our captain?" Vrwenen nodded. "Yes. Does he come from a noble line?" The woman smirked. "Captain Rains would love to say he does." She straightened her posture dramatically, putting on a mock baritone voice. "My grandpappy always claimed we're descended from the old Earth Spartans, thousands of years ago." Then she burst into a laugh. "He's got no proof, though." Zelia's ears flicked in curiosity. "So, his bloodline is likely too diluted to matter. And I've never heard of these so-called Spartans. How fearsome could they be?" The woman grinned. "They weren't just a single family. They were an entire culture that merged into a nation called Greece. Though they're not exactly around in the same form these days, the legacy's still there. They're considered some of the greatest warriors in human history." An understanding smile spread across Vrwenen's face. "I see," he said, obviously connecting the dots regarding the Rasavi tradition that had just been triggered. "And what were their beliefs?" "From what I remember," the woman said, tapping her chin, "the only way to get your name on a grave in ancient Sparta was either to die in battle, if you were a man, or die in childbirth, if you were a woman. Both were considered honorable. They were fierce, disciplined, and sometimes just a single statement from a Spartan general could keep entire armies at bay." At that moment, Captain Ethan Rains himself stepped into the detention bay, scanning the scene, the grinning human woman, his second-in-command, Tess Monroe, a stoic-looking male Rasavi counselor, and a flustered princess. He raised an eyebrow. What's all this commotion? Tess hopped off her crate. Oh, you know, just talking about Spartan marriage fights. Ethan exhaled sharply. It wasn't a fight. Back in old Sparta, men would sometimes sneak around at night to meet the women they fancied, at least that's the rumor I remember. Not quite a duel. Verwenen cocked his head. So, Captain, you might find a female, attractive and carry her away for the night? Princess Zelia's eyes went wide. Verwenen, enough. Ethan looked momentarily thrown. I never really thought about whether a Rasavi could be, beautiful. I mean, we've been at war with you for years. But if we weren't fighting, he shrugged. I guess it's possible? That settles it, then, Verwenen declared. The battle took place at night, there was some manner of single combat, even if your soldiers joined in, they were no match. According to the guidelines of both cultures, it seems to fulfill the ritual's conditions. Tess blinked. Huh? She glanced from Verwenen to Zelia, then to Ethan, whose expression was morphing into horrified realization. Verwenen's ears perked up. Yes, Captain, by ancient Rasavi custom, and apparently by a muddled, but passable, echo of Spartan tradition, you and the princess are betrothed. Ethan backed up, arms held out. Whoa, whoa, whoa. There is no way. Zelia let out a hiss, her fur bristling. We are in agreement on that. There's no chance. Actually, Verwenen interjected, as steward to the royal family, I'm required by law to inform her father, Emperor Dravik, that these conditions have been satisfied. I cannot lie to my monarch. Tess nearly collapsed with laughter, a sound that drew every other soldier's eye. Several humans snickered, the few Rasavi prisoners looked completely scandalized. One of them burst into a short bark of humor, until Zelia whipped her head around, baring fangs. Whoever just laughed, the princess snarled, will have their tongue removed. She then shifted back to Ethan. If we kill Verwenen right now, no one would know. Tess shot her hand up cheerily. I'd know. Verwenen nodded. And that makes two of us. A single untruth from either side would break centuries of custom. Emperor Dravik will uphold tradition, especially if it means a potential ceasefire with the humans. Ethan bristled, flexing his hands. We'd have to silence a lot more people than just Verwenen. Psst, Tess whispered to Ethan with a grin, command just pinged us. They want an update on the high-value target we captured. Ethan groaned. Figures. He gestured for everyone to quiet down as he ducked into an adjacent corner with Tess. All right, T, keep it together. No more jokes, okay? She bit back a smirk. I'll try, but if they mention forced marriage, I might lose it. He rolled his eyes. I'll do the talking. They stepped over to the comm station, leaving Zelia bickering with Verwenen in hushed, furious tones. A short conversation later, Ethan returned, face pale. Tess dabbed at her eyes, which were still brimming with tears of laughter. What's the verdict, Captain? She teased. Command told me, he said wearily, that if Emperor Dravik won't willingly negotiate a ceasefire, we're supposed to use whatever means necessary to secure it. Tess snorted. Well, that's convenient. Because apparently, you're stuck in an engagement ring scenario already. That earned her a quick smack on the back of the head. Stop it. You said you'd die if you started laughing, so I just saved your life. Tess rubbed her skull, still grinning. At least warn me next time. Behind them, Zelia had mustered enough of her composure to glare daggers at Ethan. You think I'd ever agree to marriage with a human? I'd sooner die. Yeah, well, Ethan said quietly, I'm not thrilled either. Let's see if we can get that ceasefire. He exhaled and turned to Verwenen. We'll do the communications in private. But just so it's clear, I'm not going through with any wedding. Verwenen's voice remained calm. Our Emperor must be informed. Ethan waved Tess over again. We'll hash out a plan. If worst comes to worst, maybe we use this betrothal rumor to buy time. Regroup. Figure out something less drastic. Tess touched her sidearm meaningfully. Or deliver a final blow, red wedding style. He raised a brow. Tess, you're twisted. She sighed. Gallows humor, boss. It's how I cope. Either way, Ethan muttered, command wants results. If faking an alliance does it, I guess I'll take an arrow to the knee for the team. Tess snickered again. There's that cursed grin. I knew you'd break first. When they returned, Zelia and Vrwenen were in a heated debate, with the older Rasavi brandishing his hands in exasperation. Zelia bared her fangs, but as soon as Ethan approached, she snapped her mouth shut. Ethan didn't say a word, he simply grabbed a cleaning rag off a shelf and gently but swiftly stuffed it into the princess's mouth. Zelia's outraged mumbling was immediate. Vrwenen looked horrified. That is no way to treat the future. We're not talking about marriage, Ethan cut him off, pressing the rag in more firmly to avoid a shrill barrage of curses from Zelia. I'd like to keep my hearing. Now, about contacting Emperor Dravik? Vrwenen swallowed. The signal frequency is 39.773.901.47.2. Keep in mind, I'd refrain from using any insulting terms. Our Emperor does not appreciate hearing that humans think he resembles a breakfast cereal mascot, whatever that is. Long story, Tess said, stifling a grin. Let's get this over with. They hoisted Vrwenen to his feet, his hands still bound, and approached the communications console. The operator typed in the frequency. Vrwenen keyed in a code with his claws, and soon enough, an image filled the screen, Emperor Dravik, the massive leader of the Rasavi. His voice boomed through the feed. How dare you abduct my daughter, the Emperor roared. If you do not return her within 1 Earth hour, I will glass that entire region of your planet. I refuse to see my daughter suffer at the hands of. Calm down, Ethan spoke up, wearing his most confident smirk, Dad. The Emperor froze mid-rant, eyes bulging. What did you call me? And why is Counselor Vrwenen standing at your side like some accomplice? Vrwenen stepped forward and cleared his throat. Your Majesty, it is with utmost regret and unshakable duty that I inform you, this human, Captain Ethan Rains, has fulfilled the sacred rite of unity. Tess leaned in, adopting a sarcastic sing-song voice. You might say he's taken your daughter's hand in marriage. The Emperor's fur bristled. You cut off my daughter's hand for some barbaric ritual? Vrwenen raised his own bound hands in a calming gesture. It's a figure of speech, Your Majesty. On Earth, they say, taking one's hand to mean an offer of marriage. Humans place rings on each other's fingers during their ceremonies. Tess and Ethan both stared at Vrwenen, impressed. He merely shrugged. A steward must learn all significant details of allied species. Ethan refocused on the Emperor. As your future son-in-law, he said, wincing at the phrase, I'd appreciate if you could stand your forces down. No sense in accidentally wiping out a potential relative, right? Dravik's muzzle wrinkled. A low, rumbling growl escaped him. Off-screen, there was a frantic scramble as some officer attempted to interpret what was happening. The princess, meanwhile, managed to spit out the rag behind Ethan. I object to this charade. Zelia hollered, her voice rasping from the gag. The Emperor bellowed back, I cannot halt tradition, daughter. If Vrwenen has confirmed the conditions were met, it would require me to break centuries of our laws, dooming our bloodline, for me to refuse. Ethan and Tess exchanged looks, newly aware that they'd waded into far deeper waters than expected. The seriousness in Dravik's voice made it clear that a quick, comedic escape from alien marriage wasn't so simple. Dravik exhaled heavily, then turned to someone off-screen. Relay the order. Our battleships will stand down. Return fire only if provoked. At once, the human operator on their side received a similar directive. "Captain, command is halting further aggression for the moment," the operator said, sounding relieved. Snarling, the Emperor turned his attention back to the feed. "Listen well, human. If you have deceived me, if your plan is to use this to gather your might and crush us, I will do more than glass a continent. I will see your entire species wiped from existence." A tight knot formed in Ethan's gut. Tess gave him a pat on the shoulder, a mischievous glimmer in her eye. "No pressure, Cap," she whispered. Zelia stared between them, fury and desperation swirling behind her bright eyes. Even though her father had recalled their forces, it was clear from her posture that she might still pounce on Ethan the moment his back was turned. He let out a nervous laugh under his breath. "Right. No pressure at all.